Welcome, everyone, to the Super Connector, where we talk about all things related to the world of influence, everything from sales to leadership, personal branding, networking, and my personal favorite, how to win friends and influence people. Today, we have a special guest, Dave Barton. Dave is a seasoned remote sales professional, founder and CEO of Brave Sales, and a fellow podcaster. Brave Sales is a passion project of his, which is a community of sales professionals that want to sell authentically with integrity. You can check out his channel on YouTube in the comment section down below, as well as his link to his private community of sales professionals. Dave, so happy to have you on. How are you doing?
Awesome. I appreciate you having me on. It's really great to be here.
Great, great. Now let's get into it. So, can you tell us the story about how you made your way into the world of remote sales?
Yeah. I kind of fell into it, to be honest. It wasn't a planned move by any means. I've done a lot of things in my life that, up to that point, I made the move over when I was around 31. So I know I look about 12 if I shave, but I am in my mid 30s now. But basically, I got to a point where I was working a job and working a commission only role before it was the online space. I was making $50 a sale in like the commission only, and I was like, well, there's got to be a way to make more money. How can I get better at sales? So I actually found Cole Gordon before they were big. I was their first sale when they weren't really a company yet.
Really?
Mitchell sold
Wow.
me in. Yeah.
Okay.
Igor was my mentor. And I actually joined it just for the training. It wasn't like a placement thing or anything back then. And
Yeah.
I was just like, if I can learn better skills, maybe I can make more money. And then after about a month working with them, Igor said, instead of making 50 a sale, do you want to make 500? And I said, show me how. And then
Yeah.
they put me in with someone. And
Yeah.
that's basically how I got in.
Great. Yeah. I mean, Cole Gordon is very big in the remote sales community here. How did you find his methods, what he was teaching, and do you still use any of it now?
I think I think for obviously it was the first time I was introduced to a sales process in quotes, right? I've done sales before, I've done retail, I've done call centers, things like that, where it's all a bit as it comes at you, you just deal with it. So with Coles, it was a lot more like here's my first introduction to a process, a framework, and all that side. Being fully transparent, my opinion of it back then, it was a little complex. There's a lot of different moving parts. I think he likes to be very thorough, he's very analytical. So it covered every possibility, which again, is that a bad thing? That's a personal preference, I think. But it got me into it. It got me to understand the general flows. Definitely used it a lot at the start. And then I started to build my own process out, tried everyone else's theories and frameworks. And to be completely honest, completely realized that quite a few of them are all very similar anyway, because they all kind of come from the same sort of family tree, let's call it.
Yeah.
Um, but no, in general, yeah, it was again, it's just a very thorough look into sales, I suppose.
Yeah. And what you said there about how you kind of fine-tuned it to your own, I guess you would say
Mm,
personality, or
mm,
I had another guest on the show, Pierre Gooch, and he said many instruments create beautiful music. And the reason
mm.
there's so many different types of sales training is because there's so many different types of people. And it's not just the people that you're selling to, it's also the sales professional.
Yeah.
So I find that a lot of what I study or what I learn does not jive with my personality. And so it's very incongruent and it comes across as very inauthentic, right? And I
Yeah.
know you're big on authenticity.
Mhm.
So how did you manage to eventually come to a point? What was that like when you started to realize that you had to inject your own authenticity into what you
Mm.
learned? Because there's the very technical part which you study, and then there's your own personal personality. How did you
Yeah.
uh, kind of combine those two together? What was that process like?
100%. I think for me, it's a little bit like any other. So I'm a musician as well, right? When I was a lot younger, I was in a band and I learned music, and I love music. I think anything like music, sales, business, anything, there's science and there's art to it. There's both. So the same as if someone was, learning the chords to a song, and then you listen to two different versions of the same song, and it's the same song, but it's not. Right? When you hear it, it's like, oh, I can tell that this one was this. And I've been listening to a lot of Johnny Cash recently, right? And one of his biggest covers is Hurt by Nine Inch Nails. Very
Right.
different songs, right? But when you listen to it, you're like, yeah, that's Johnny Cash, but it's the same song, same chords, same lyrics. So it's the same with processes, right? It's they give you the basics, but then it's your personality, your thing is to bring how everyone says you sell how you would buy as well. So you bring your personality to the table and then you put it in. So for me, I think for me, I wanted to get it right first, in quotes. I wanted to get it right to the process. So I stuck a little bit too rigid. And then I started to realize, okay, this doesn't work for me. I need to change this, borrow this from there, and kind of just built it out. It was more out of, I don't want to say necessity that I changed, but more out of, I want to enjoy what I'm doing. I don't want it to be just a school project that you've got to get 100% marks on. That's not
Yeah.
sales.
It's interesting that you spoke about you when you were I played the guitar when I was younger,
Okay.
and my neighbor was my teacher. And when I would
Oh, well.
play, he would often tell me that you're playing very robotically. You need to put
Mhm,
your own soul into it. And I find that it's the same way reading from a script. It's
mhm.
someone made a post on Facebook. It said, "Have you ever cried during a sales call?" And I wrote, "It wasn't on the script." So right?
Brilliant.
So it's like I find that when I do that, I'm finding it difficult
Mhm.
myself uh to kind of create that cohesiveness. And
Right. Yeah.
would you say it's a process? How long did it take you to start feeling really comfortable with it?
I think it comes back to, it might sound a bit strange, but it comes back to finding your voice first. I think a lot of the things that we do in sales is, how do I make this work? How do I make this offer work? How do I sell these type of people? Things like that. I'm a big believer in, if you haven't sorted yourself out in the nicest way, there's going to be issues no matter where you go, no matter what you change, no matter what you do. And I think it's not even sort yourself out. What I mean is you've got to understand who you are. You've got to understand where you're going, and you've got to understand, is it congruent to there? So there's a great book called Be Your Future Self Now by Benjamin Hardy. And one of the things he talks about is who you want to be, and then you've got to be congruent with who you want to be, not with who you are now. Sales is the same, right? So if you want to make a process your own, you've got to know where you're going with it. You can't just go, I'm just going to change this and this. It's like, why are we changing this? Why does that work? How does that fit into this? What does that need to do? So I know you interviewed Eli Wild, right, the other day,
Yeah.
and so he's got a lot of influence and persuasion things,
Oh yeah.
like from Tony Robbins and people like that. So when you look at all these other people, this is what I did. I didn't just follow Cole's thing at the beginning. Cole was my intro, and then I started looking at, like I say, like Tony Robbins, hypnotists, all these other people. And I was like, okay, what does this work? Why does this work? Where does that go? What's in alignment with who I want to be? And then I built my process around that. And that means it'll always change a little bit as well, because as I grow older, who I want to be changes. So my process changes a little bit too. So it is a process, but when you're working in that way, it's so much more fun because it's real, it's
Yeah.
genuine. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
rather than just, how can I make the most money? It's a great question, but I believe you make the most money when you're most like yourself. That's my
Yeah.
thoughts.
And everything's just so much more comfortable too. Takes away the pressure. And you spoke a little bit before about what I call imposter syndrome. And I guess would that be the correct, yeah, imposter syndrome? Did you experience that during the beginning of sales, like in the remote sales industry? And did you have to overcome that somehow? Even just being on sales calls, simply.
Mhm. But I still have to overcome it now. Right. I think I don't know to what degree imposter syndrome is this, if everyone's thinking of the same thing, or
Oh yeah.
whatever. But what I interpret that as is, maybe I'm not quite enough for the thing I'm trying to do. That would probably be my interpretation for the sake of this conversation. That's a constant battle for me, to be completely honest. So even with my podcast, even with this episode you invited me on, like I'm following Eli Wild, and this felt like, okay, should I be here? Right? Genuine questions like that. But I think it's always a process. I think that's where the future self helps, because if I'm hearing my future self's authority, it doesn't matter what I've done now. it's something I can look back on and be like, okay, yeah, I'm in alignment with where I am now, whenever that is. So I think it's something, but I think it's something very natural for a lot of people. And I think that's the type of person that I like to deal with in like terms of like, so I'm a sales manager on one offer, I'm obviously a closer, I obviously run my own things. I love helping people come through this side because there's normally something within them that they haven't quite seen yet, but they know there's something more they can be doing. And when you can get someone to feel that and express that and see that come to life, that's
Yeah.
so freeing.
Yeah. And that's a part of leadership too.
Mm.
And I love to talk about
Yeah.
leadership. And I guess as
Yeah.
a sales manager, you are in a position of leadership as well,
Yeah.
somewhat.
Yeah.
That's right.
100%.
This is a topic that I like to talk about often. A lot of people seem to think that leadership might be about giving out orders or
Mm.
simply being more qualified. But when I listen to John Maxwell, he constantly talks about servant leadership. So it's
Yeah.
the person that leads by example. They don't just delegate and give orders, but they
Mm.
mold and shape them into being leaders themselves. So
Yeah.
what's kind of your take on productive leadership?
Yeah. It's an interesting one. For me, first of all, I like analogies to kind of get concepts over. If you think of a coach or a leader on any sports team, actually, let me take one step back. What I would say the industry tells us first is that you have to be at the best of everything before you ever help someone else do it. Right? I think that's a pretty fairly standard, like I can say that statement,
It's
right?
a
And you get
little
what I
bit
mean.
overwhelming. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
However, if you look at a sports team, right, first of all, everyone would agree that not all the best players make the best coach. But I'm going to take the analogy one step further and say the coach hasn't played every position in the field, right? So even if they were the best, they were the best at one position, not at all of them.
Yeah.
So if they can lead them, then that's what sales leadership's about as well, right? So that's why if you're a sales manager, you can work with closers, setters, salespeople, business owners. You've still got to lead from your position. And it's about having that. I think the best way to do it is make sure you've got a mission that the business or the team is aiming towards.
Hmm.
And, whether that's your ultimate mission doesn't matter massively as long as it aligns with the journey you're on right now. And it's about exposing them to that mission. And if they're having a tough time, so if we're talking about salespeople and they're having a tough time, they're not, maybe closing where they should or whatever, you sometimes may need to say like, come on, like pull it together, but more often than not they know they're doing not as good as they should. You
Yeah.
don't normally have to, like, in sales you don't normally have to kick people to get them to move. More often than not you need to just realign them with where they're meant to be going and where they said they want to go. So sometimes it's just sitting down and being like, okay, where do you want to be? Are you still on paths to that? Where are you at now? What's your numbers? No one looks at numbers. Salespeople go off emotion a lot. And then you're like, I'm in a really bad slump. And okay, let's look at your numbers. Like, you've had one bad day. Like,
Yeah.
and then they're just like, oh, okay, I got it. I'm fine now. And you're like, cool. Then back on the horse, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's about. It's about exposing and bringing out the facts for them,
Yeah.
aligning it with their mission, and then letting them run with it. That's really what it is.
And, when it comes to personal development, because what you were explaining before about yourself, especially in the
Mhm.
beginning of your remote sales journey, it seemed like you were talking a lot about personal development and how you needed to develop yourself in order to be aligned with what you were doing and actually enjoy it. And I noticed that, I try to practice leadership skills in any way I can. I don't believe that
Mhm.
I need to be in a, quote unquote leadership position like being a manager to have leadership qualities. I believe that everyone has them to a certain extent, some more,
Yeah.
some less. And when you can encourage someone to do everything themselves, well, it makes everything a heck of a lot easier, and leading with action, I think, is the most important. And leading with
Mhm.
action tends to be the scariest because that's when the imposter syndrome comes in. But I
Yeah.
had another, there was a great quote from Princess B who came on this podcast, and she said, on the other side of discomfort is everything in the world that you could possibly want. And how
Mhm.
true is that?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's so true. It's so
yeah,
true. That's why leadership's so important with on that sales call as well. And when you're dealing with prospects and other people. And like you said, right, you don't need to be in a position before you show leadership. It's actually a reverse, you need to show leadership before you're in that position, otherwise you'll never get in the position. So
That's right. And that's such a
it's
logical perspective. And a lot of people don't think of that. They have to see you
yeah,
as a leader and practicing it before they put you in the position, right?
exactly. And you have to see yourself as a leader before you put yourself in a position to show other people that you're in that position. You see what I mean? So that's where it
Yeah.
comes back to looking outside of yourself and going, cool, do I see myself as a leader in 10 years' time? Because if I do, then I need to start acting like that now. Otherwise, I'm not going to get it. Same as on a sales call, right? When they're showing a lot of fear about a big decision, especially if you like the biz op or B2B sort of B2C sort of space, there's a lot of the time it's just scared of stepping into a new paradigm of who they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
But the whole point of a sales call, this is another thing I love to talk about at the moment, is the industry talks about fear and scarcity and lack. We use that 'cause it's a quick fix. But people don't need to be scared into something. People need to be like pulled into something by themselves,
Yeah.
you know? So when you can help them step into who they want to be now, well, who they want to be in 10 years is who they're going to be now. It's like, well, you've got to make decisions like that person, otherwise you're not going to get there. You
Yeah.
don't become that person before the decisions, unfortunately.
Yeah. And, I always think of you spoke about scarcity. There's
Mm,
abundance and scarcity, and having an abundance mindset probably the best way to sell, and it's also the most enjoyable way to live. And it always reminds me of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where at the bottom we
mm,
have, food, procreation, water, the essentials that we need to survive. And but once we have all that, a lot of people that are in positions of leadership have the top of the pyramid, which is
mm,
self-actualization, and that's what they are focused on. And it's difficult being in a point of scarcity, especially when you're just coming into the sales industry and you don't have a job yet. So how
mhm.
do you think it's possible to keep a self-actualization mindset while at the same
Mm.
time feeling like, man, somebody give me a break, please. This slump that I'm going through is terrible. I need to make sales. So how do you think that can be done?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. That's also a thing I say to people when they say if they want to move from a position into a management position. I say make sure that regardless of the outcome, your needs are already taken care of. Because if you're also in the scarcity mindset, but you're leading, you're pressuring your salespeople in a way that they can't handle. So it's the same sort of thing. But yeah, I think with people when they're coming in, I mean, I jumped in with both feet, which I don't know is always the safest option. So I quit my job. I quit both of my jobs and took on just that one. I mean, to be fair, for the first month, I ran 3 jobs, and then I was like, okay, I've made some good money here. I can do that again,
Okay.
and then quit. So I was up at like 6 every morning, and then in bed by like 3 or 4 in the next morning. Like that was my life for like a month and a bit while I was running all these jobs. And then I was like, well, I can't do that, but I've made good money in the online space, so I'll jump in. I
Yeah.
think you need to, I think you do need to be practical. I think you need to make sure that you are in a position where, actually, no, let me take this back. Understand yourself first. I'm not going to give a generic advice. There's 2 ways most people make decisions. You're either avoidance based objectives or you're um, like future based, right? So you're either running away from something or running to something. That's the old cliche, right?
Yeah.
Um, But what that means is some people need to put themselves in an uncomfortable position to even try, right? If they're comfortable, then they won't even try and take the steps they need to. So if you need to figure out, am I the type of person that needs to burn the bridges so that I do push? Or am I the type of person that when I do that, I'm actually less likely to succeed? Because that's just one type of advice people give. Burn the boats, all that good stuff, right? But don't forget, some of those army people who burnt the boats, they also died just because the
Yeah.
war was won by everyone.
Yeah,
Like
that's right.
the overall, you
They
know what I
didn't
mean?
all
Like
succeed. Yeah.
no, not all of them were empowered by that. Some of them ran probably the other way and got shot, right?
Yeah, that's
So
right. Yeah.
it's the same with us, right? It sounds nice and it sounds good, but if you're not motivated that way, then you need to figure out, okay, maybe I need a part-time job while I'm doing this so that I'm not in scarcity, so I am in abundance, and then I can
Yeah.
stay there and then transition. So I think you've got to understand yourself first. And I think that's what the industry never tells you. What they would normally say is, this is how I sell, so you should do what I do. It's
Yeah.
great. It doesn't normally lead to everyone succeeding. Otherwise, there'd only be one program in the space.
That's
You wouldn't
right.
need the others.
That's right. And wow, what a difference it makes between, I mean, some people can be absolutely incredible sales professionals, but when it comes to teaching, they seem to
Mm,
think that, well, what I did worked, so I'm just going to teach them what I did. But in fact, it's different for each person. And I think that's what really separates a mediocre teacher or coach from a great coach or teacher, is that they are able to tailor what they teach in their leadership position to the people that they are hopefully molding and turning into leaders themselves. Now,
mhm.
what made you decide to open a YouTube channel and start a podcast?
It's something I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to do things like this, but what I actually did was I unplugged for a complete week. And by unplugged, I switched my phone off, didn't have the internet, nothing. Just went on holiday with my girlfriend and my dogs and
Yeah,
just chilled out by the sea for a whole week. And during that time of unplugged, honestly, the clarity was just so much stronger. You're not pulled by all these different people's marketing and all that side. And I just said, okay, where do I want to be? Who do I want to become? What do I want to do? And then what's the things that I can do right now that would be in alignment with that? So I wrote a list of all the things I could be doing, wrote what I want, and then picked off 3 or 4 of those things that were in alignment, even if it's not exactly the same. So, for example, one of the things I really want to do is I want to be a speaker on a stage. I've known that since I was like 5 years old, right? That's what I've, but I've never known how. I've always been like, what do I do? I grew up in like a church environment,
yeah,
but I knew I wasn't going to be a preacher, right? I don't follow that sort of system anymore. That's not who I am. So that, well, I can't just become a preacher just so I get to speak on stage. That's a little unauthentic.
yeah.
But I was like, but what will get me there? Well, doing podcasts and interviewing people and being on podcasts like yourself, that's a great way to start stepping into that persona, right? So that was one of the reasons I did it. The other reason is being completely transparent. I think there's a big need for authenticity and integrity within the online sales space.
Yeah,
What I've seen over the last few years, it does hurt me to see a lot of the stuff that's happening now because there's so much smoke and mirrors. I've been behind the scenes on lots of different businesses. I've been invited to help with their processes. I've been a closer. I've done loads of different things. And there's a lot of people out there that say one thing because that's what you have to do publicly. And then when you're behind the scenes, you're like, you're not even close to what you're telling people.
oh yeah,
And that is really dangerous, especially for people like me who have imposter syndrome, looking at these people going, well, they must be doing amazing. And then you actually talk to them and they're just really not. And I think for me, I also wanted to bring that to the industry. And that's part of what my community is about as well, is what's the reality of this? So when you said, right, some salespeople, trainers are like, well, it worked for me, so I'll teach everyone. What
yeah,
they forget is how they felt when they started. They know where they are now, so they try and teach you from their viewpoint now. But it's a lot easier to say to someone at the top of the mountain, "Come on, like it's a really nice view up here," when you forget that back down there was boulders 10 feet high that you had to climb. You
yeah,
know, like it's great to show them there, but you've also got to remember how to get them over those parts to meet you there as well. And that's what started me on this journey, and I'm making some moves in it.
yeah. So I would say that, YouTubing and podcasting and posting on Facebook, I would consider YouTubing and podcasting specifically to be a strong part of a personal brand. Some
Yeah.
people, their personal brand is just putting out, snippets, shorts of what they're doing throughout the day. Some people, it's just putting out comments or questions on Facebook or Instagram. How important do you think, how important would you say personal branding is these days when it comes to being able to find work? Because let's
Mm.
face it, jobs in this industry don't tend to last that long. I think it's about 6 months on average from what I understand. So
Mm.
how does that play a role into being able to network and find positions?
I think personal branding, if I'm honest, I think 2024 is the year of personal branding for sales professionals. And because of that, I had Sky Stack on my podcast to talk about that because he's a personal branding expert.
Okay.
And I think it's the most important thing because now there is a surplus of people in the sales space than there ever has been. There's more people in there now looking for jobs than there is jobs.
Yeah.
So you need to stand out. If you have a really strong personal branding presence and there's a lot out there, you're going to have people approaching you or at least referring you for jobs. And we all know that the best, like the highest, whatever percentage way of getting jobs was a referral, right? Like
Yeah.
that's when you look at all the stats, like that's one of the main. Well, how are you going to get referrals if no one knows you?
Yeah.
So personal branding is huge. I think the double sided of the sword though is people worry, will it stop me getting certain jobs if I am outspoken in a certain way or my brand's a certain thing?
Oh,
Possibly, possibly, but would you, it's the same as like dating and things, like would you rather it pushed away the people you didn't vibe with anyway and weren't going to be in a good relationship with? But ultimately, yeah. I guess this comes back to your necessity thing though. If you're desperate, you'll take anything. So,
yeah. Oh, it's a
I
terrible
do
feeling.
think,
It's a
yeah.
terrible feeling.
So personal branding, no, I think it's the most important. I think without it, you're just someone that is just going to be a number put up against others, and that's not the office fault. Unfortunately, like I hire people, and that you do just get like 60 people messaging your inbox. At some point, you have to narrow them down. But if I see someone, I'm like, oh, I know that name. I'm going to check it out more, just because I'm human, right?
Yeah,
It's
of
like
course.
that's the way it works. You gotta play the system in that sense. So yeah, personal branding I think's huge, and I think everyone can take advantage of it. It's free.
That's right. It's free advertising for yourself. And I had another guest on this podcast. He was talking about when you really blow up with your personal brand, you can be Stephen Smith, the sales professional. And then if I want to change over to trading and I'm a beginner trader, all of a sudden I'm Stephen Smith, the trader, because I'm
Mhm.
big enough and I have enough presence. So I can actually get referrals into something
Yeah.
like that. So I think it's great. And this brings me to a question that I have for you is sales the final destination for you, or do you want to move into entrepreneurship or maybe even something entirely different? You said public speaking was a big thing of yours.
Mhm.
So what would you say that final
Yeah.
destination is, if you know what it is?
Yeah. So sales is definitely not my final destination. It's definitely a skill I needed to learn and something that I enjoy helping people with and teaching and all that side. I think it becomes a little bit of an echo chamber when you're suddenly in it and all you can hear is sales, sales, sales. So I'll buy this program, I'll do it, and you just keep getting locked in. But there's so much more out there. For me, the final destination, I don't know. I don't know if I want to, I don't know if I have a final. Public speaking and an author is definitely on the cards. But I feel like I'd probably say I'm going more personal development and like Tony Robbins-esque direction than I am sales. You know what I mean? So it'll include sales forever, I'm sure. But I just want to help people. I've had a bit of a difficult past. So one of the things that I really want to do, this is one of my goals that I have to keep coming back to keep me on the track, is I want to build a restaurant, right? And in there, I want to be able to put on musicians and things like that, kind of like the old school Vegas style where they got the tables up like that and then a stage and they have all that.
Yeah,
But I also want to put accommodation on the side. And most of the staff is going to be homeless people that we can house in the accommodation, give them a job, get them back on the ladder, build them up, give them a 12-month stint there. Then they've got an address, they've got whatever you call it, a testimonial in our language, but you know what I mean? I can't remember what it's called now, but someone they can refer back to say, look, I did this job, get them back on the housing ladder, get them back in employment, because I know firsthand how quickly you can become homeless with not actually making any decisions by yourself. It can just get taken from you.
yeah,
And in my country, at least, you can't get benefits if you don't have a house, and you can't get a house if you don't have money. They're just stuck on the street.
yeah,
So that's a huge passion of mine to get to a position. But to do that, I'm going to have a lot of money. So
yeah.
entrepreneurship is definitely my next venture. And I'm going to have several businesses, some that I want to exit and sell, some that I want to build out, and then work up from there.
What are some of those ideas you have for entrepreneurship aside from the restaurant? Do you have?
Yeah, to sell, I want to build and sell. I think the first one I'm probably going to do that with is some form of e-com store. Um, I'm not looking to sell it for millions, being honest. The first sale I want to make is probably 500K. So you've only got to make 30K a month profit on a business to sell it at around that price.
Yeah,
So that's not a million miles away from anyone's grasp as long as you know what you're doing.
yeah,
So to begin with, it's going to be a couple things like that, kind of vague, faceless, that side of things, so I can sell it. But in terms of my other entrepreneurs, I definitely want to, obviously, I want to grow Brave Sales. That's a big thing for me because it's the community side, it's helping people. I want it to be real. So I definitely want to grow that. And then I think just not necessarily life coaching, but that side of things like mindset, life coaching, things like that. That's my other sort of pronged attack.
Yeah. And I think it's more important for sales professionals than the actual script or the methods and technical methods that they use. Because if they're
Yeah.
not able to be comfortable with themselves and they're not in an abundance mindset, they can't sell no matter what techniques that they use. Because it
Yeah.
just, people can just sense that scarcity and desperate
Yeah.
nature within them. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's really bad, especially in networking as well. It's really bad.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
what differences have you noticed in selling in a niche that you're not really interested in, as opposed to a niche that you're really passionate about?
That's an interesting one. I think I have a personality type when novelty's important to me. And when it becomes too out of my kind of excitement, I struggle more. I think some people can switch it on and more power to them. I'd love to be able to. But I think when I'm in that position where I don't care about it anymore or it's not a good fit for me, I think this is where my version of integrity comes from. If it's not something I would buy or sell to someone I actually care about, I don't I can't sell it to someone else. There's like a block. Now, is that something I should work through? I don't think so. Is it something I could? Of course, right? I
Yeah.
could get through that. But do I want to? No, it doesn't align with where I'm trying to go.
Yeah.
But I do, yeah, that's a big struggle, I think. And I think it's okay for it to be a struggle because you don't just don't sell there then. There's plenty of other places you can go, and find something that you don't have to necessarily be excited about. Like it doesn't have to be brand new, it doesn't have to be like AI everything and all as it is now, right? But I do think you have to believe in it to sell properly, if you're coming from integrity at least.
Yeah. Great. So I think this question would be even better suited to you than it would to a person that has been podcasting for 10 years.
Okay.
What would you recommend? What recommendations do you have for people that want to start their own podcast?
I think the cliche, just do it, is the
Yeah.
main thing. I think for me, once I'd done the first one, it's kind of like the 4 minute mile. Once someone actually did it, everyone else could do it. And I think for me, it was once I'd actually done just one and put it out there, I was like, okay, I just got to do another one. Two things that really helped me going back to when I started. One, I printed out a sheet with 1,000 circles on, and it's 1,000 posts, is what it's titled. And all my game was, it's not about the results. Because when I wanted to do this years ago, and I never did because I was like, I want it to be perfect. It's got to do this.
Yeah.
I was like, this time round, all I'm going to do is every time I make a post, I'm going to squiggle out a circle. The goal is by the end of 1,000 posts, I'm going to be better than I was. But if I'm not where I thought I should be, it doesn't matter. That wasn't the goal. The goal was just completion. So I started with that. Excuse me. And I probably got to 40 posts within like a week or two. And then I was like, now I can probably do my first video because I feel excited because it just momentum builds. So that was a huge one for me, having just an arbitrary thing that had no, doesn't matter if it's good or bad. I didn't say 1,000 winning posts, just 1,000 posts. If one bombed, fine. Like that wasn't, again, it took the pressure off. So that was a huge one for me. What was the second one? It's blank now. So it's doing that post. It's gone. And that might have been the one that helped someone. It might come back to me. But yeah, doing things like that where you take the outcome away from the thing and focus on the process. That's
Yeah.
huge. So you want to do a podcast, just start videoing. Oh, I've remembered the other one. The other thing was I looked at the statistics of podcasts, and if I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, I did make a post about it, but basically 99%, 90% of podcasts end after episode 3. And then the top like 95% only get to episode 21 or something like that. So if my goal is get to 21 episodes because then I'm in the top like 3% of podcasts ever. That was
Yeah.
it. That's it.
Yeah.
not views, just literal episodes, because everyone starts and gives up. So if you can just have, so again, what I did is removed the outcome and was like, the process is I've got to do these posts and I've got to get to episode 21. So I'm still on my way. I'm on like 13 now, I think. So I'm almost there. But once I get to 21, I'll change it. But I'm like, that's kept me going. By 21, I'm probably going to be in the habit and keep going.
And I'm the type of guy where a lot of people that I speak with, and they're thinking, wow, I don't know if I could podcast because I look at all these
Mm.
podcasters and they have thousands and thousands of views. I'm jumping up and down when I get 10. Like, I'm just like, all I want is just some people to watch it. And I'm like, yeah, this is
Yeah.
awesome. And
Yeah.
I would say that this definitely is a passion project of mine.
Mm.
And one thing that I will say to the people watching that are thinking of starting their own podcast, when you feel momentum in the
Mm.
podcast, oh, there's nothing like it, because people will send you messages out of the blue. Just one person is all it takes to say, hey, I just
Mm.
watched your podcast, the guest you brought on and what you said, that really
Mm.
changed my perspective on XYZ. And now I'm noticing that I'm actually able to be more relaxed during the sales process, or maybe
Wow.
I'm pushing myself harder with public speaking. It's amazing
Mm.
what one person can say, a word of inspiration or advice,
Yeah.
and it doesn't need to come from me. It can be coming from you or anyone else in the comment section. It
Yeah.
feels good to be able to make that change in a person's life. It really pumps me up. And I know you had explained it. It pumps you up too, eh?
100%. I love it. I love those sort of moments. And it's the same in my community. If someone makes a post on something a comment on a post I've made, or, just that's an amazing way to think of it, or anything like, yeah, like you say, like, you're just like, that's it. What I would say is don't start a podcast and hope for those. Start a podcast and enjoy those when they come, because you could easily stop after episode 3 because no one's watching yet. Like you said, right? If I get one subscriber, I'm like smiling from ear to ear. I'm just like,
Yeah,
that's awesome. I think I've only got like 23 or something, right? So that's huge, like numbers for me.
yeah.
But that's huge, right? That's someone who's literally just gone, what you're doing is important enough to me to just keep an eye on it. Like that's, but if my goal was to do as many views as I could, you're going to get discouraged. So I think it's do it knowing eventually you're going to get impact in people's lives, but do it for your mission first, and then the rest will come. But it is
And
exciting. I love it.
the way that Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and all those other social media platforms, TikTok especially, the way that their algorithms work is that you will see the most popular posts
Mm-hmm.
that are similar to your interests.
Yeah.
So when we look at that, and we automatically think when we start, well, how am I going to measure up to that? And it's a very
Mm-hmm.
unrealistic expectation to have. So I'd say just take a look to anyone else that's doing it that has very few viewers. Maybe just message them and say, hey, how do you like podcasting? Or what's it like doing
Mm.
it? Maybe you could do a collaboration like you reached out to me. And I think that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
When you have a community of like-minded people that are passionate about what they do, it makes all the difference in the world.
Definitely.
And
It's
so,
huge.
yeah. So one last question I want to ask before I wrap up, and I ask this to everyone.
Okay.
What words of advice would you have for people that are starting in their networking journey? They don't even have
Mm-hmm.
jobs yet, okay? And they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to get into the remote sales space, but they're petrified because they believe that no one will respond to them, or they're filled with dread and they think that they're never going to get a job and they're going to have to go back to whatever job that they
Mm-hmm.
hate. What words of advice would you have for those people that are watching right now?
I think the first thing is the more the more that someone sees your name before you message them, the more likely they are to respond. So what I mean is there's people's names that I've not spoke to, but I know in the space purely because they're in a free group, like maybe Undeniable, like JD's group or one of the others and things like that. I pick JD's purely because his group is probably one of the most engaged groups
Yeah,
in the sales space. And there's people's names I know that if they message me now, I'm going to respond because I've just seen them commenting on people's posts.
yeah,
And I think that when people say lead with value, I think that scares a lot of people because they're like, well, I've got nothing valuable to add. And then they try and give advice, and you're like, that's not what the value means because you are just starting. The advice might not be great. Sometimes it's just a thumbs up or a heart like reaction, and then a this is fire comment, things like that, right? On multiple things, and or I've been thinking the same thing, like just things like that. I think that's how you start giving value to the space. You start showing up. I think that's what people need to do. It is scary messaging. Um, and being honest, as someone who would get people messaging saying, I just want to ask you these quick 3 questions and stuff, I don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
So if I don't know you, it's not a personal thing. It is just, I don't know if giving you that time right now is in my hierarchy of my needs, right? It goes both ways. Sometimes I will, sometimes I can't. But it's about if you're like, it's the same with like TikTok and all those. If you're omnipresent, people will then start to see you, will start responding, will start asking you for advice. I think I would just say get more visible, whether that's branding like we already talked about, or if it's just giving value in terms of attention to other people. That's a big start. I think that would be where I'd start.
And what you were talking about that omnipresence, the great thing about having a podcast and about more and more people knowing you and having an impact on their lives. This is something that Eli Wild spoke about, the 4 levels of influence. And the 4th level is influencing people when you're not even around. And so when you're omnipresent like that, you're able to instill your own values into people, your own encouragement, your own passion, and when you're not even there. And then when you have people message you out of the blue and you're just like, wow, I had the ability to do that, which is such a great feeling. So
It's
I
huge.
think it's really awesome that you're getting that out there, that I'm getting that out there, and we're both becoming omnipresent people in the remote sales space. This was such a
Yeah.
great interview. I had a great time, and we're definitely going to do this again. That's for sure. You're a great guy.
Yeah.
This is the first time we met, but I watched a few videos of you, and I knew you would be great to bring on the podcast. So this was really
There we
awesome. I
go.
loved it. And we're
I
just going to wrap
appreciate
this
it.
up here and wave goodbye to the audience, and we'll stop the recording. See you later,
Sounds
everybody.
good. Appreciate it.
All right.